I'd been swiping on Tinder for weeks and hadn't even had one match. I didn't get it. It's not like I was butt ugly or anything. Finally, my phone beeped. I'd matched with someone. He asked me to meet in an hour at a nearby cafe, and so I quickly changed into a cute outfit and rushed out the door. When I saw him, I was shocked. He was sitting in a booth with a girl opposite him. I couldn't believe it. I'd heard this kind of thing could happen, where a guy would have 2 dates in a row. I decided to walk by and see if he noticed me. Well, he did, and he legit screamed, and in the process, knocked his soda all over his date. Ha! Served them both right. But then he stood up and started pointing at me and said, "There's 2 of you." The girl turned around and I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was my sister. My identical twin sister, to be precise. "Belle, what are you playing at?" I said. She got annoyed at me and said I'd ruined her new dress by turning up like that and giving her date a fright. She said she'd come in for a coffee and this guy had run up to her and started chatting. I told her I'd matched with him on Tinder and that he was waiting for me. The whole time, the guy just stood there, looking back and forth between us. We must have been making a lot of noise because suddenly some other random guy came up to us and in a not-so-subtle way told the guy that I was supposed to be on a date with that me and my sister had been with everyone in town and that he should run while he still had the chance. "Excuse me," I said. This was supposed to be my first date ever. Like the first date I've ever been on in my life. But the random guy just burst out laughing and said, "Sure, and I'm the Queen of England." Then he walked off and my date left with him. As they walked out the door, I heard the waiter say, "Sorry, bud. Those girls are always up to no good." That was the final straw. I'd had it with my sister. My whole life, she'd always gotten her way. The only reason she even graduated high school was because she made me sit her exams. I felt like such an idiot. No wonder I'd only had one match on Tinder. Everyone probably assumed I was my sister and wanted to run for the hills. I mean, I knew my sister was pretty active in the dating scene, but I didn't know she was basically hooking up with every guy she set her eyes upon. I stormed out of the cafe and she ran after me. She said it was just coincidence what had happened in the cafe and that she hadn't dated that many guys, but I didn't believe her. She'd always been like this. She used to steal my toys, then my friends, and now my first date ever. I was 21 and all I wanted was to meet a nice guy and marry him. How hard could it be? I tried Tinder a few more times, but one guy messaged me saying I was a liar, that my name wasn't Cassie, it was Belle, and that if I thought I could fool him, I had another thing coming. Then he blocked me. I'd been away at college for 3 years, and I'd been so focused on my studies. I hadn't made any time for guys. Now I was back home, and my sister had messed everything up, but I wasn't going to give up that easily. The next time I saw her heading out for a date, I followed her. I wanted to see what she did that made guys so weary of her. Did she just go on one date, then dump them? Also, I kind of wanted to get back at her for what she'd done to me. I kept a safe distance and watched as she met this guy in the park. They chatted for a bit, then they went off together. I tried to follow, but I lost sight of them. An old woman noticed me and said, "Oh dear, I think I'm seeing double." Then she wandered off. Damn, I couldn't believe I'd lost them. I waited for ages and eventually they came back, and my sister kissed him goodbye and went off to her car. For some reason, he stayed in the park, and after 20 minutes, I decided I had nothing to lose. I walked up to him and he started grinning. "Back for more already?" he said. I have no idea why, but I told him that yes, I missed him already and maybe we could hang out some more. He looked at my outfit and frowned. Then I said I'd quickly changed because I was feeling cold, and then he shrugged his shoulders and said I looked even cuter now. The awkward part was that I didn't even know his name, but I couldn't exactly ask him now. We ended up chatting for hours, and I apologized for making a move so quickly. And he said it had been fun, but maybe we should slow down and get to know each other properly first. I agreed. And then when he went to the bathroom, I took his phone and quickly changed my sister's number in his phone to my number. At least I knew his name now, Kenneth. We said goodbye and I went home and waited until my sister was asleep. Then I took her phone and deleted his number and blocked him on her Tinder. I just had hoped that she didn't notice. The next morning, I asked about her date the day before. She said he wasn't her type and that she wouldn't see him again. Thank God, I thought, but there was just one small problem. I really liked him, but he thought I was my sister. I had to ask Belle what she talked about with him so I didn't mess up the next time I saw him. But she just winked at me and said, "We didn't really do much talking, if you know what I mean." I texted him straight away and said I'd really enjoyed yesterday and couldn't wait to see him again. He replied immediately and asked if I wanted to go watch a movie that night. Wow, someone actually wanted to go on a date with me. I mean, okay, he thought I was Belle, but so what? It was me he actually liked, right? That night we went to the movies and I told my sister I was going to my friend's house. She just teased me if she knew I had a date. And of course, she had another date already. She moved on fast. At the movies, we waited in line to buy popcorn, and when we got to the front, the girl said, "One box not enough?" I was confused. Then I realized what was going on. This couldn't be happening. I told Kenneth I wasn't feeling well, and he said he was sure I'd feel better after taking a seat. I just wanted to get out of there. What were the chances that both me and Belle were on dates at exactly the same movie theater? He went to the bathroom, and I stood there waiting nervously. Then I felt a hand on my back and heard a voice saying, "Ready, babe? Movie starts in 5. But it wasn't Kenneth's voice. No! I told him I needed to use the toilet quickly, but he was like, "Didn't you just go?" So I laughed and said, "Yup, tiny bladder. Meet you in the back row." Then I ran into the toilets. I knew my sister was in there and I just had to hope she didn't see me. Luckily, she was still in the cubicle, but she was on the phone and already arranging her next date. She was insane. Still on one date and already planning the next one. I couldn't risk her going out and bumping into Kenneth. So I went back out and luckily the coast was clear. Her date was gone and it was just Kenneth standing there. I told him I'd been puking and really needed to go home, so we left. He seemed disappointed but said we could just go see the movie another time. I decided the only way to date Kenneth was to do it in secret from now on. I knew I'd have to come clean at some point, but I wasn't ready for that yet. He kept asking to meet my family, but I always said they were too busy, and eventually he stopped asking. We always hung out at his place, which suited me fine. After a few months, my sister announced that she was taking a trip to visit a friend on the West Coast. She just up and left, which I found totally weird. I'd been spending a lot of time with Kenneth, so I hadn't been home much. But our mom said she was acting kind of quiet, and she thought something might be wrong. Meanwhile, Kenneth still called me Belle. It was starting to bug me. This whole time, I'd always thought I was nicer than my sister, but in reality, I was just as bad as her. I tried calling her, and every time she answered, she said she was fine. But I had a feeling something was up. Maybe she knew I was dating Kenneth and had left because she felt hurt. But then she finally told me the real reason she'd left. She said she was pregnant, and she was trying to figure out who the dad was. My heart almost stopped. Then she said she was 99% sure it was this guy who lived on the West Coast, so she'd gone there to find him, and he was super happy, and now they were thinking about getting married. I couldn't believe it. I never thought my sister was the kind of person to get married. This whole time, my goal had been to find a nice guy to marry, and she'd beat me to it. After we hung up the phone, I decided to tell her that I was dating someone. I called her back, and she said she was so happy for me and couldn't wait to meet him. I chickened out from telling her his name, though, but she'd find out eventually. That night, I was going to Kenneth's for dinner with his parents. He picked me up, and as soon as I got in the car, I knew something was wrong. He looked angry, and he took out his phone and showed me a picture. It was my sister and her boyfriend at Disneyland in LA. He said his cousin had just sent him this pic, and did I want to explain myself? The picture had been taken the weekend before when I'd canceled my date with Kenneth because I hadn't been feeling well, but now he didn't believe me. He thought I was cheating on him. Oh no, I had to tell him. "Actually, that's my twin sister," I said. And he looked at me like I was insane and told me to get out of his car. But I begged him to listen to me. I told him that she was actually Belle and I was Cassie, and that I pretended to be her the first day in the park because I was getting revenge on her, that I'd actually fallen for him. And by then it felt too late to admit what I'd done. Then I told him my sister had moved to LA to live with her fiancé. I even showed him a photo of me and Belle together so he'd believe me. He told me to get out of his car, and he said he never wanted to see me again. I was devastated. I'd completely messed up. Kenneth stopped replying to my messages, and I found it hard to go to work and act like a normal person. I missed him so much, and I started to miss my sister too, even if she had kind of driven me to do this in the first place. After a few months, she came home. Her bump was huge. She was only 8 weeks away from popping, but she was alone, and I knew that meant her and her fiancé had broken up. She said he knew he couldn't be the father because the dates didn't match up, so he told her to go home, and now she was going to be a single mom. She asked about the guy I'd been dating, and I said he'd broken up with me too, and she said, "Oh man, all guys are the same." But I was lying. You see, I'd started seeing Kenneth again. He said he missed me so much too, and that life felt empty without me in it. So we'd been meeting up in secret. At the same time, my sister and I started to grow even closer, and when she gave birth, I was right there with her. I told her to do a paternity test to figure out who the dad was, but she said she didn't care. She could manage it alone. When my nephew was born, though, I knew something was up. He had thick red hair, and that could only mean one thing. And when she saw him for the first time, she knew it too. "I know who the dad is," she said. And I wanted to scream because I knew exactly who the dad was too, and that meant my life was over. Kenneth had red hair. I decided there was only one thing for it. An hour later, Kenneth turned up at the hospital. I texted him and told him to come quickly, and he was so worried. He thought something was wrong with me. When he arrived and saw me standing there next to Belle and her newborn baby, he almost passed out. I felt so stupid. How had I not thought of this before? My sister asked Kenneth how he knew to find her here, and then before I could even say anything, he blurted out that he'd been dating me for the past 9 months. And my sister looked at me with so much hurt in her eyes. What should have been the happiest moment of her life had just turned into a complete disaster, and it was all my fault. You're probably assuming that my sister and Kenneth got back together to raise their son, right? Well, not exactly. You see, Kenneth and I were seriously in love. He wanted to marry me. And although it's weird to marry the man who got your sister pregnant, these things happen. My sister eventually forgave me, but I know we'll have a lot of explaining to do in the future. Their son is going to wonder why his dad is also his uncle. Whenever Kenneth and I take him out to play, people just assume he's my baby. We're getting married soon, and who knows, maybe we'll have a baby not long after. His cousin will also be his half-brother. Yep, it's kind of complicated, but I got what I wanted in the end, and maybe now my sister will think twice before dating every guy in town.
Hi, I'm Diana, and my relationship with my mom has always been pretty interesting. You see, my mom is in jail, and has been for about 10 years now. I live with my older sister who has done her best to look after me, but it's just not the same as having a mom around. It isn't her fault that she's in jail. My dad didn't treat her very well. One night, she took the money out of their joint account and ran away for her own protection. She even had to leave me behind to try and escape him, but the police caught her trying to leave the country with the money. The court didn't believe her, and she ended up being charged with fraud and being sentenced to years in prison. I try my best to keep my mom happy. I bring her presents, and I cook her favorite cakes and bring them to her in prison, but they never seem to make her happy. She's so unhappy in jail that I just can't do anything to fix it. Well, at least she is one of the most popular women with the other inmates, as she told me. They even call her Rocky as she's so tough. No one will dare to mess with her. So, with Mother's Day coming up, I knew I had to do something really special to make her happy, and I had the best idea. I thought I would do something different, and something big. I hired a plane to do some skywriting in the sky above her prison. I thought when she and her prison friends saw it, she would be so happy. And I was going to surprise her by skydiving out of the plane, too. When it got to the day of my skydive, I got really nervous. I don't like heights. When I was up in the plane, the man literally had to push me out. I was so scared. But once in the sky, I was having so much fun. I really started to enjoy it. As I was falling to earth, I was so happy. I could see all the inmates in the yard below and knew that my mom would be there watching. I looked up and saw the plane in the sky riding in pink smoke. Happy Mother's Day, Rocky. I was so pleased. Then I pressed the button on my backpack and it released more pink smoke, my mom's favorite color. I was so excited. Mom would definitely see me now. But I hadn't anticipated one thing. I couldn't see. There was smoke everywhere. I started coughing and spluttering and my eyes were sore. Then I started to worry. I knew that I had to release my parachute, but it was so smoky I couldn't see the pull cord. I started feeling all over myself trying to find the cord, but I just couldn't get a hold of it. Then I looked below me and I was near the ground. I knew if I didn't pull the cord soon, then I would be in big trouble. I finally found the cord and pulled it. I felt the parachute open up, but it was too late. I was traveling too fast and I was going to hit the floor with a bang. I closed my eyes and braced myself. I landed on my back with lots of women in orange jumpsuits gathered around me. Then some prison guards ran over to me. It was pretty scary. Some of them had guns. There was a lot of shouting going on. I looked around. I couldn't see my mom anywhere. I became aware that I couldn't feel my legs. I looked down and realized they were sticking out at funny angles. I let out a scream and then passed out. I woke up in the hospital with lots of doctors and nurses working on me. There was blood everywhere. I must have passed out again as I woke up a few days later with both of my legs in plaster. It turned out my parachute had opened, but I still hit the ground really hard. I had landed right in the middle of the prison yard. I should have died, but by some miracle I had only broken my legs. The next day I was discharged from the hospital. I rolled outside and waited for my sister to come and collect me. But she didn't turn up. Instead, a police van pulled up in front of me. An officer got out and asked me my name. When I said who I was, he told me that I was under arrest. I was wheeled into the back of the van and driven off. I was so scared. I had never gotten into trouble in my life. They wouldn't even tell me why I was being arrested. We got to a large building and stopped outside. I was wheeled in and they finally told me I was being arrested for breaking into the women's prison. I told them that it was an accident, that I was trying to surprise my mom for Mother's Day, but they didn't believe me. I asked where I was going, but they didn't answer. They just wheeled me into a room where 2 men were waiting. I realized they were prison guards. I was being put in prison. After changing into my orange jumpsuit, I was led through a door into a big cafeteria. The prison officer told me sarcastically that I was lucky as I had just arrived in time for lunch. He laughed and left me. All the prisoners in the room turned around and stared at me. This really tough-looking woman walked up to me and looked like she was going to start threatening me. Before she could say anything, I told her that she'd better watch out, as my mom was Rocky, and if she messed with me, she'd have to answer to her. The woman's tough face dropped, then she started laughing. She told me that the nickname Rocky was ironic. She wasn't tough. She was a wimp and a liar who everyone hated. I then got really angry at the woman and said that my mom would be out of the prison soon anyway, that she didn't even deserve to be in prison with her and everyone else. She started laughing even more and said that my mom was in jail for child abandonment and she wasn't innocent. I couldn't believe it. Why was she saying that? After eating the worst meal I had ever had, I wheeled around the prison until I found Mom. I asked her about what the woman said. She said that yes, she had abandoned me. She had never wanted me and she'd lied about why she'd gone to prison. She had stolen my dad's money and had left me in a car to go and start a new life. He was the innocent one in this, not her. She said that I was such a stupid girl, I always believed her lies. Then she told me that she was going to be released in 2 months. So she would be in the real world and I would be the one stuck in prison. Then I saw who she really was. All my life I had idolized her and tried to impress her, and I could have died trying to make her happy, and it was a lie. Well, I had had enough. For the next few weeks in prison, I kept my head low. Luckily, people left me alone. I used my time to think up a plan for revenge. One day, my sister came to visit me. When she arrived, she already knew of my plan. She'd always known what my mom was really like. It was just that I'd spent so many years thinking my mom was wonderful, I had refused to believe it. When the guards weren't looking, she slipped a small package into my cast. Later on that day, I waited until Mom left her cell. We hadn't spoken for weeks, so I had to sneak in. I got the package out of my cast. It was lots of packets of cigarettes. I took one out, then hid the rest inside her pillow. Then I lit the remaining cigarette and let the smoke fill up the room. I chucked it under her bed, then got out of there as quickly as possible. I waited a while, then I told a guard I could smell something funny coming down the hall. The guard sniffed the air. He could smell the smoke. My plan was working. He would find the cigarettes and think she was selling them to the other inmates and she would get a longer sentence. That would serve her right for lying to me for all these years. But as the guard ran in, the fire alarm went off. I must have started a fire. We all had to evacuate. We were escorted outside as the prison went up in flames. But the big yard we'd been in had led out to an open gate. Some of the inmates saw it and made a run for it. There were so many people on the run that the guards couldn't stop them. And one of the inmates escaping was Mom. As she ran out to her freedom, she turned and gave me a wicked smile. I didn't try to get away. I was innocent, and besides, I was in a wheelchair. But I was so angry seeing my mom getting away. The fire was put out pretty quickly, and we were all moved back into the prison. 20 inmates had escaped, and over the next few days, they were all found and brought back to jail. The only prisoner they couldn't locate was my mom. A week after that was my court date. I was let off with a warning as they understood that it was a stunt gone wrong, not a break-in attempt. As the verdict was read out, I looked around the courtroom. I could see someone I recognized watching from the back. It was my mom. She was wearing a wig and a fake nose, but it was definitely her. I moved back in with my sister and life got back to normal. But I was always expecting my mom to turn up again one day. About a year later, there was a knock on the door late at night. I opened it and my mom was there. She pushed past me to get in. She begged me to help her. She'd been on the run for so long now. She looked different. She'd had plastic surgery to change how she looked. She claimed to be working as a spy, helping to rid the world of injustice and helping others like a superhero minus the powers. But there was a problem. If she was caught and taken back to jail, her good work would have to end. She needed me to go drive her to the border where someone was going to meet her and help her escape the country where she could carry on doing good. I agreed to help. She hid in the back of my car and I put a blanket over her. I drove in the dark with my lights out until we reached our destination. The men were there to meet us, but when I opened the boot and pulled the blanket off of her, she saw it wasn't the man she expected to see. It was the police. She looked at me in shock. I smiled to her and said, "That serves you right, Rocky." "What did